You are watching Alabama football on YouTube. Trey Yanity joined with Andrew Bone tonight. Tonight we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We usually join you on Tuesday nights to break down the world of recruiting, but today we're going to be breaking down a specific position. And Bone, as we get into the show tonight, I want you to kind of explain this big board process. I know you've released your position breakdowns on BamaInsider.com really throughout the spring, talking about the best quarterbacks in the class, the guys at Alabama we're most interested in. And it's kind of like the NFL draft. You have Mel Kiper's big board. I know this is Andrew Bone's big board for Alabama football. So just to start it out tonight, kind of describe, what goes into this process and detail it a little bit better there. And guys, as we start the show tonight, please hit that like button for me. Get in the comments. Let us know what you think about the linebackers. That's going to be the group we're breaking down today. Excited to get into it. Bone, how are you doing? And tell us about the big board a little bit more.
Yeah, doing great. The biggest thing, about these big boards is kind of explaining to Alabama fans these are the guys that Alabama's recruiting. These are the guys that they're going after. And sometimes they may have to wait their turn in terms of there may be, five quarterbacks on the Alabama recruiting board, but there might be two guys on there that they would only take commitments from. So after those guys make their decisions, if they hadn't committed to Alabama, then you kind of go on down to the next one. So we kind of give Alabama fans a little bit of a taste of, here are the main guys that they're recruiting, that they're talking to. Doesn't mean every single one of them has that committable offer, but it's at least guys that they're bringing in for visits. They're, even guys they bring in for officials. Everybody kind of gets confused a little bit because anytime a kid comes in for an official visit, it must mean that Alabama or whoever school they end up visiting really wants that kid bad. Sometimes it does. Most of the time it does. But some of the times it really just means they want to get these kids on campus, evaluate them, at least from a mental standpoint, get a chance to, and sometimes kids only take official visits to that program. So getting a kid in town for an official visit, maybe the only chance you get to get that prospect in town, at least to meet with the coaching staff. But over the course of the last few months, and we started this back in, I want to say we started in February, back with the big board. We started out with the quarterbacks, talked about the running backs, and we've talked about these position groups on our Tuesday night show. So today's going to be a little bit different. We're just talking strictly about this position group, the linebacker, because we're kind of getting down to our last two position groups. So I wanted to do it just on our YouTube channel, breaking down those two position groups. So we'll do linebackers today. Next week, we're going to talk about the defensive backs, the top guys that Alabama is going after. And things have changed a little bit throughout the course of the last few months. We've seen a lot of new offers that have been extended. Some guys have moved up the board, some guys have moved down, and that's going to continue to happen over the course of the next few months, especially when summer camp gets here. There's going to be so many top kids that are going to come in, guys that are ranked high that are going to get evaluated, and they may not end up making a trip back to Tuscaloosa just because Alabama's decided not to recruit them anymore. And then you're going to see probably some 3-stars, guys that Alabama fans hate hearing about most of the time. You're going to see some 3-stars that are going to get offered by Alabama. They're going to move way up the recruiting board because they are better than that 5-star or better than that top 100 player. And then once those new evaluation pieces come out, those new rankings come out, then you start seeing guys move up the recruiting list. We kind of saw that last year. Kobe Prentice, 3-star wide receiver. Didn't have many big offers, had some, and obviously committed to Maryland, flipped his commitment from Maryland to Alabama. Alabama fans weren't sure, because there were some 5-stars that had visited Alabama or at least were on the recruiting board that Alabama decided, you know what, this guy's better than these 5-stars that we're recruiting or these top 100 guys we're recruiting. This is the guy that we really want. And then all of a sudden he makes a big move into the Rivals 100 before he signed with Alabama. We saw that with Amari Kneblack. Amari Kneblack last year, I remember looking at his profile page when he visited Alabama. I was told, hey, this kid's really showing out in Tuscaloosa today. His name's Amari Kneblack. So I go to his profile page. It was listed at 6'2", 100 and I think 97 pounds, something like that. But sometimes these height and weights on these profile pages, they don't get updated for a while. And so I think his profile page didn't get updated since the time it was created, which was probably his freshman year or sophomore year. And he comes to Alabama and measures in at 6'4", 230 pounds and runs a 4.55 in the 40. So when people were looking at, I guess, the rate, trying to decide where should we rate this kid, they probably looked at his junior film. They probably looked at the offers that he had. They probably looked at his height and weight on his profile page and said, okay, let's slap a 3-star ranking, or he may not have even had a ranking at the time. And then once they get reevaluated during the summer, they move up the recruiting board, and obviously Amari Neblack, in my opinion, was a 5-star recruit. I know he was rated in the top 100 on Rivals, rated in the top 100 on pretty much all the sites. I think one site did have him as a 5-star, but I think he's one of the top 3 players in Alabama's recruiting class. So kind of got to get to those summer months. And you look at Alabama's recruiting class right now, currently with only 2 commitments. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You get a chance to really evaluate kids throughout the spring. Coaches are going to be hitting the road here in the next couple of weeks, going out to spring practices, spring games. Then you're going to get a chance to really evaluate kids once summer camp starts. So the big board right now are the guys that Alabama knows about, that they're recruiting. Most of them are guys that could probably commit to Alabama, but you just never know how often it's going to change. And we're going to be updating the big board on Bama Insider. We're going to have it all in one place, all on one post, the quarterbacks all the way to the defensive backs, and we're going to be taking names off throughout the rest of the year. We're going to be adding names. So these are kind of the names right now that we're really kind of focused in on. But there's going to be plenty more guys that are going to get added to this big board, the overall big board, over the course of the next few months.
Yeah, there really is so much time for these rankings to shift and change. So, guys, be sure to keep updated with those big boards on BamaInsider.com. But excited to talk about the linebackers today, really dive into this position group. And, last season, Alabama, not the largest class by any means when it came to linebacker, but a very talented group. And you talk about Jeremiah Alexander, Jihad Campbell, Sean Murphy, a part of that class as well. What's the look for 2023? Does Alabama try to go out, get maybe more quantity this season, or do we see similar look from 2022 when they got a whole lot of quality?
Very high quality players in last year's recruiting class. I think the biggest thing with those guys is they're already all on campus. They're all going through spring practice, so getting those guys there early, big benefit for them and for Alabama. So this year recruiting cycle, still looking for high quality players, but they're also looking for probably a little bit more in terms of numbers. I think they would love to get 4 or 5 linebackers in this year's class. Really kind of focus in on inside guys, but also trying to get some outside guys. Some of these edge rushers. There's a lot of top edge rushers throughout the country, but there's also a lot of guys who can play multiple positions. And I think that's kind of the biggest storyline that we're seeing with a lot of these top guys that Alabama's going after in this year's recruiting class. A lot of really athletic linebackers that can play inside or out. Probably try to make some final decisions on that. Either one, when they come to camp, you work them out and go through the drills. Now, a lot of these guys, they don't necessarily have to camp. They can just show up, visit, but at the same time, a lot of these guys are going to want to work out at the camp. Just kind of get a feel for the coaching staff, and coaching staff get a feel for, is this the position that he's going to play? Is he going to play inside? Is he going to play outside? Could he potentially grow into a defensive end? These are some questions that Alabama is going to have for some of these guys moving forward. But most of them, I think they pretty much have it, in their mind. This is where we're going to play you. This is where we're going to recruit you for. And because obviously a lot of these guys, they want to know where they're going to play before they get to campus. Some of them probably a little bit more open than others. Some only want to play a certain position, and they're going to go to the school that's going to allow them to do that.
Yeah, certainly so. Going to be really fun to kind of see what the look is for this class. High standards to live up to after 2022. So let's get into it. Let's talk about some of these in-state guys to start. Yanze Pierre, Quay Rousseau, 2 guys that Alabama is very interested in. I know Pierre was here for junior day, and Rousseau made a trip earlier this year, but hasn't been back in the spring yet. Where do these guys stand in their recruitment? And do you think Alabama can sign one, maybe both of these guys?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're recruiting in-state kids, especially guys that grew up, watching the success of the Alabama football program, especially at the linebacker position. I think you're always going to have a great chance to land those guys, especially if they're top priorities for you. Quay Rousseau, one of the best linebackers, one of the best overall prospects in the entire country, and this is one of those guys who can move around in that defense. You can put him on the edge. He can play outside. He can play inside. He is just a dynamic football player that Alabama really wants as a part of its recruiting class in the Montgomery area. And certainly a top guy that they've really been going after really ever since the fall. He didn't get an offer until the fall from Alabama, made his first trip to Tuscaloosa, and has been talking to the Alabama coaching staff really ever since. Charles Kelly recruits that area, does a great job down there, and has landed some big targets. So he's going to continue to be one of Alabama's top targets throughout the rest of this recruiting process. I don't see that changing at all. He hasn't visited Alabama this spring, but I certainly expect that to change potentially, in the next week or so as Alabama gets ready for its spring game. Definitely a guy that I think could end up in Alabama's class. He could end up in Georgia's class. Could end up in Auburn's class. I think those are probably the three schools that are fighting the hardest for him. Now, he likes Texas A&M, visited, and I know Alabama fans don't want to hear that because of the success that Texas A&M had last year on the recruiting front. I don't see him going to Texas A&M. I do think he's going to stay, a little bit closer to home, but in the end, it could end up being Alabama, Georgia, or Auburn. He did grow up a diehard Auburn fan in an Auburn household, and they're really coming after him pretty strong. But I do think in the end it's a closer battle between Alabama and Georgia for Quay Rousseau. Now with Yonsei Pierre, he's made a couple trips to Tuscaloosa, was at Alabama for junior day back in March, and I certainly think that Alabama's got a very strong chance to land him. He's out of Eufaula High School, and Alabama fans know Eufaula from Courtney Upshaw's days down there. So this is another kid that they're certainly pressing for. Rated like right there as a weak side defensive end, but more so recruited as an outside linebacker, and definitely somebody that Alabama has stepped up its recruiting efforts in over the course of the last few months. He is going to make a visit to Alabama for the spring game next weekend. Wouldn't be surprised if he went ahead and made a decision here in the next couple weeks. He hasn't said that. Now, I'm not trying to say that he's set up a decision or it's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised. Coming back to Tuscaloosa, hasn't really taken many trips. He's got a top 8, but I think Alabama's in a very good position with Yonsei Pierre right now.
Yeah, a couple of big in-state recruits. Be great to get at least one. Keep one of the two in-state, maybe both. Keep an eye on that. But Alabama hosting a big outside linebacker this weekend. The #1 outside linebacker in the country, MALIK BRYANT, coming into town, taking his first visit with the Crimson Tide. How important is this trip for Alabama, especially with his announcement regarding his finalists right around the corner now?
This is another really explosive athlete that plays linebacker position. Rated as an outside linebacker. Played that edge rusher position last season at IMG Academy. Could also potentially be an inside backer. Alabama is extremely high on him. He is going to announce a top 4 here in the next few weeks. I believe on May the 1st he's going to announce his top 4. I think it's going to look something like this. I think it's going to look something like Alabama, Georgia, Florida. I think Miami's going to be in it. I think that's probably going to end up being his top 4. I know that there's some other schools, certainly fighting for him and certainly want him as part of their team, including Oklahoma. So we'll have to kind of wait and see what he ends up doing. But this is going to be his first visit to Alabama this week, and he's always had high interest in Alabama. So this is big to get him on campus, see everything, be around the program. He attended IMG Academy last year, so he's going to see a couple IMG guys, including Jahai Campbell and Tyler Booker, who he played with last season. So I'm sure they're going to spend a lot of time with him and try to recruit him. But I would be very shocked if Alabama's not in that top 4. Now, he's going to wait until July to make a decision. He's got a commitment date currently set for July the 23rd. Going to take some official visits in the month of June. So I certainly, as of right now, expecting him back in Tuscaloosa for an official visit sometime next month. Because I think this weekend's really going to, blow him away with him visiting Alabama for the very first time. His high interest in the Tide. I'd be shocked if they're not one of his 4 finalists.
It's going to be a really big weekend. Alabama, of course, with their second scrimmage before A-Day this weekend. So, going to be good to get him on campus, get him around that. Excited to hear how that trip goes. And, we stay in the state of Florida. I guess a guy originally from the state of Florida. Raul Aguirre is originally from Miami, now attending Fayetteville High School in Georgia. Alabama made an offer back in February. Does the Tide have a strong chance? This guy's 6'2", 215 pounds, to be another huge linebacker in this class.
Yeah, and I think he's recruited more as an inside guy for Alabama. This is certainly a guy that they evaluated back, after his junior season, and really like what they saw. Extended him an offer in February. I know he's trying to get back to Tuscaloosa. He's actually visiting Ohio State this week, so we'll see if he makes a trip back to Tuscaloosa. I know he's been trying to set up a date to Alabama this spring, so won't be surprised if he makes a trip back over the course of the next week and a half. So we'll see if he makes a visit to Tuscaloosa. But yeah, this is definitely somebody that they like a lot, that they've been really pushing for, at least to get back on campus. And I certainly can see him potentially in Alabama's class. Now, Miami might be a little tough. He's got some strong connections down there. He's got a lot of family that's down there. His father's originally from Miami, and I think he went to high school, the same high school that one of Miami's, I think it's Miami's offensive line coach, used to coach at. So there's a connection there. But he definitely has high interest in Alabama, has high interest in Georgia, and there's obviously some other schools that are in the mix. Like I said, he's visiting Ohio State. So a lot of top schools really going after Raul, and I certainly think that Alabama is going to be a top contender for him until he makes that decision.
Guys, we continue to break down this linebacker big board. Need you to keep hitting that like button for me and keep getting in those comments. Let us know who you think is the best linebacker in this class. We talked about the top-rated outside linebacker, in the class. Let's move it over to the top-rated inside linebacker in the country, Anthony Hill from Ryan High School in Denton, Texas. Ryan High School may sound familiar. Drew Sanders, recent transfer from Alabama now to Arkansas, originally from Ryan High School as well. Alabama has been involved with Hill for quite some time now. Do they have a legitimate chance of signing him? Where do they stand in his recruitment?
Well, they certainly have recruited him for a very long time. He visited Alabama last year. Hasn't been back since, but he keeps telling me that he's trying to make a trip back to Tuscaloosa. He said he was going to try to get back this spring. We'll see if he makes a trip back this month. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but he's at least probably going to make a trip to Tuscaloosa during the summer. He has Alabama in his top 6. I think it's going to be a little bit tough to get him away from home. I think Texas A&M, Oklahoma, all top schools for Anthony Hill right now. But Alabama, still right there in the mix. So I think the biggest thing for him is just getting him back to Tuscaloosa. The biggest thing for Alabama is getting him back to Tuscaloosa, getting around the program. But he does talk to the Alabama coaching staff on a weekly basis. So obviously, the interest remains, very strong on his part. And obviously, I think he would tell Alabama, "Hey, not interested. Quit calling me." So I think that there's definitely still interest there. But the biggest thing, getting him back on campus, getting him around the program, and I think as of right now, I would say that Alabama's on the outside, but get him on campus, see what happens.
Yeah, no doubt. Let him see Tuscaloosa. Can always change somebody's mind. A lot of talent really in Texas there, and really just in the south central region of the country when we talk about linebacker. Let's talk about a couple more of these guys. DERION Gullette visited Alabama this past weekend, and by Job as well from Sooner Country, Norman, Oklahoma. He's going to be making a visit to Alabama this weekend. Talk about where they stand in their recruitment at this point.
Yeah, with DERION Gullette, I kind of see him more as an inside linebacker, and he had a chance to visit Alabama this past weekend. Came with his family. I really enjoyed the trip. A 3-star guy, but I think he's much better than his ranking, and I think Alabama feels the same way because he's a definite take for the Crimson Tide. They're certainly making a really strong push to get him on board, but yeah. Being in Texas, always tough to get those kids. I know he's going to Texas A&M spring game this weekend, but they really like him a good bit. And I had a chance to talk to him just the other night about his trip to Tuscaloosa. One thing that stood out to me, it wasn't about really his trip. One thing that stood out to me more was him talking about Henry To'oTo'o, Alabama's returning inside linebacker, saying that he watched him on every single play, didn't make a single mistake, was really impressed with what he saw, read the offense extremely well, and was just really impressed overall with what he saw out of To'oTo'o. So he plans on coming back to Tuscaloosa. I know he'll definitely get back for an official visit, and certainly somebody that we're going to be watching closely over the course of the next few months. From Marlin, Texas, kind of in between Austin and Dallas, but certainly somebody that we're going to continue to talk about over the course of the next few months. So getting him on campus this past weekend, huge for Alabama, for then and moving forward.
Yeah, no doubt about it. A lot of talent in the state of Texas there. And a lot of talent, some guys already committed elsewhere to other schools. You mentioned Henry To'oTo'o, big transfer for Alabama at linebacker. There's some guys not necessarily signed up anywhere quite yet, but they do have commitments at other schools that Alabama is still interested in. Some guys that they could potentially get. 5-star edge rusher KEON out of Berkeley Prep in Tampa, Florida, committed to Notre Dame right now. And 4-star linebacker Suntarine Perkins from Raleigh, Mississippi, committed to the home state school of Ole Miss. Can Alabama flip either of these guys?
Yeah, and before I talk about them, I'll talk about Bay Joe because I failed to talk about him when you mentioned him a few seconds ago. Bay Joe from Norman, Oklahoma. He's more of an edge rusher, outside linebacker. He's going to be visiting Alabama actually this upcoming weekend for his first trip. Originally from Senegal, he's going to be making his first visit this weekend. He's a kid that is extremely talented. I read a story. He actually moved to the U.S. to play basketball, but then ended up starting to play football as a freshman and really enjoyed it. Had a great junior season last year. I think he had 16 and a half sacks this past season. So definitely somebody that can get after the quarterback and get in the backfield. And he's going to be visiting Tuscaloosa. And I think Alabama really likes him a lot. They're probably going to evaluate him a little bit as far as just getting an accurate height and weight, getting a chance to sit down and talk to him, have some players around him, just see if, this is some, Alabama's a program where he feels like he can really fit in. So big visit for him this upcoming weekend. But as far as, two guys that are, certainly being pursued by Alabama that are committed elsewhere, KEELEY, 5-star out of Tampa, already visited Alabama for junior day this year. He was already committed to Notre Dame when he visited Alabama. So it's not like he just committed to Notre Dame and Alabama's out of it. Alabama's in it. Alabama's in the race for him. He's likely to come back to Tuscaloosa. He was trying to make a trip back to Tuscaloosa this spring, probably going to end up coming back this summer, but definitely a top-ranked kid. He told me a couple months ago, one of his favorite players was Terrell Lewis. Definitely somebody that he always looked up to. He also loved watching Christian Miller during his time in Tuscaloosa. Kind of emulates his game after him. So definitely a big target for Alabama, somebody that they would love to flip. Obviously, Notre Dame off to a great start on the recruiting front, and I think with Marcus Freeman being there, a lot of top recruits, especially on the defensive side of the ball, really excited about the Notre Dame future. But he's somebody, maybe he wants to play a little bit closer to home, and Alabama would certainly enjoy flipping that one away from the Fighting Irish. Suntarine Perkins is another kid that is currently committed elsewhere, currently committed to Ole Miss. And he visited Alabama a few weeks ago. Inside linebacker, has a good connection with Freddie Roach. He's certainly making a strong push to flip him. Kind of a guy of a few words, doesn't really like to talk much to the media, but we know that Alabama likes him, and they'll get him back on campus for at least an official visit. Probably get him back to Tuscaloosa sometime this summer as well, at least for a camp. But definitely somebody that we'll continue to keep our eyes on. But as we know, being in the state of Mississippi is always tough to get those kids, tough to flip them. But Alabama's certainly going after him. But as of right now, still pretty firm with the Ole Miss Rebels.
Yeah, still a lot of time with these guys. Alabama going to try to flip him. We're going to keep you guys updated, like I said, on Bama Insider. So be sure to go check out the big board as it evolves throughout the rest of this year, leading up to that early signing period in December. There's some guys not, currently being recruited at linebacker necessarily, but listed as athletes that could eventually play linebacker. Let's go down the list a little bit. Five-star Nicholas Harbor and Ronan Hanafin as well. Received offers from Alabama last week. I know Hanafin, a talented wide receiver, guy that can maybe make the flip over, as well as Nicholas Harbor. Where do you see these guys end up, playing for Alabama? Could they be linebackers? And do you see Alabama, able to sign one, two of these guys as well?
Nicholas Harbor is the best athlete in the country. I mean, he's 6'5", 225 plus pounds, and just clocked a 10.32 in the 100 meters. I mean, that's unbelievable. I mean, everybody's seen the video. I mean, he is just an unbelievable athlete, and certainly somebody that Alabama would love to get. Now, he's been really busy with his track season, obviously, by all of his top performances that we've seen online, but he really wants to get down to Tuscaloosa. He's hoping to get down to Alabama back in March. Wasn't able to make it because of a track meet, but he says he was going to try to visit again in the spring. Hasn't been to Alabama yet, so it might be in the summer before he gets back down there. But we know Alabama's a top contender. I think they're going to be one of those, top 2, top 3 schools for him all the way kind of until the end, until he makes that decision. But definitely somebody that Alabama would love to add. As far as his position goes, just tell him he's an athlete and he can play whatever position he wants to play. I don't care if it's running back, wide receiver, tight end. Heck, he can play quarterback. You just got to get this kid. I mean, he is probably going to be the most wanted kid in America if he's not already. I certainly think that Alabama is trying to do everything they can to land his commitment, but definitely somebody that can play anywhere and can be an edge rusher. I don't think he's going to play corner. Could he play corner? Probably. I think this kid could do just about anything, but I see him edge rusher, potential linebacker, inside linebacker. We'll just kind of have to wait and see where it's going to end up, where he's going to end up landing. But definitely a talented player. Ronan Hanafin, I had a chance to talk to him last night or 2 nights ago after his visit to Tuscaloosa about a week ago. Received an offer from Alabama. It's from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and he is certainly a top talent in terms of being able to play on either side of the ball. Plays wide receiver. Says he's played wide receiver his entire life, but most schools recruiting him as an athlete. I think Alabama's talking to him a little bit more about defense. Actually had a chance to sit in on the defensive meeting, sat with the linebackers. Of course, he told me he sat in on the linebacker meeting, but was watching the wide receivers when he was at practice the other day. Obviously was really impressed. He said he was, the biggest thing that he took away from Alabama's practice was just the efficiency. There was no wasted movement. They continued to do things out there. He didn't waste any time. So he was really impressed with that. Says he's looking forward to getting back to Tuscaloosa likely sometime this summer. So those are 2 kind of jumbo athletes. Colton Vasek out of Austin, Texas is another guy that Alabama offered back in February and trying to get him on campus for a visit. So there's a lot of really big athletes out there. They can play multiple positions, but linebacker is certainly a position that all 3 of those guys can play.
Yeah, no doubt. I think a lot of those guys, most of those guys you mentioned there, could play on both sides of the ball. Going to be fun to follow their recruitment, see where they end up at the college level, if it is with Alabama, what position they end up playing. Guys, for all the latest news in Alabama football and Alabama recruiting, go to BamaInsider.com, hit the like button on this video, and subscribe to our channel so you can get the latest coverage and all things going on. But as we close it out tonight, just your general thoughts on this linebacker group. Mentioned at the top of the show, really fun class in 2022. We're going to see a similar looking class in 2023. Just your overall thoughts as we close it out tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that this is going to be a class that Alabama coaches are going to be extremely excited about. In the end, we're going to probably see some more offers get extended over the course of the next few months. We're going to see some, like I said earlier, we're going to see some guys move up the recruiting board. We're going to see some guys move down the recruiting board. It's just, it's kind of evaluation season after the spring game when coaches start hitting the road and going out to spring practices, and then kids come in for summer camps. But yeah, breaking down these big boards, position by position has been a lot of fun over the course of the last few months. We wanted to do something on the linebackers, specifically online, so we were able to break it down for you all today. And we're going to do the defensive backs next week. Then we're going to put it all together from quarterback to running back to DBs and linebackers, all on Bama Insider. So you can see that anytime on the recruiting board, or not the recruiting board, on the Talking Champion. Sorry.
Guys, go check it out, BamaInsider.com. Be sure to follow Bone on Twitter as well, at Andrew J. Bone. Follow Bama Insider on Twitter, at Bama Insider. And like I said, hit that subscribe button. It's going to be the best thing you've done today. But thanks so much for breaking this position down, the linebackers. Like you said, we got defensive backs coming up, and it will be packaged all together once it's done. So be sure to check that out when it's wrapped up. But until we get to the DBs, guys, thanks for joining us. Roll Tide.